Welcome back to Interview At, where we teach you how to use the Amazon leadership principles to land your dream job. It does not matter the role, it does not matter the company. If you use the principles that we talk about here, you will absolutely show up better in your job interview. This week's candidate is a program manager, and they are targeting Amazon. And the leadership principle that we cover in this specific segment is invent and simplify. And specifically, the question is about complex problems requiring simple solutions. So we're going to jump right into it. And as always, we have feedback along the way.
So, depending on your point of view, people will say the simplest solution is often the best. I tend to agree with that, but sometimes you need to obviously get complex. But I'd like to talk about a complex problem that you solved in a very simple way.
Absolutely.
What comes to mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was working on one of the e-discovery products, and
Working on what?
e-discovery product.
Got it.
In an e-discovery product. So what happened there is we were having a set of a product setup process. When a new case comes in, we ingest all the documents, and one of the product setup process for a conversion process. If a reviewer logs in into the software, and if he has the ability, he has to have an ability to redact the contents online in the tool. So for that, what we were doing is, if they were importing 1 million documents, this tool will run and convert all the 1 million document into a specified format, so the reviewers can actually redact it. So what happened there is, this tool was actually, it took more time, and all our customers were having issues in finishing up the setup and setting and giving it out for review. So what I did is, I went and after looking at it, I went and researched our competitors and customer testimonials and gathered data from our customers, and found that the reviewers are actually not reviewing all the 1 million documents that they ingest. They were reviewing only 10% or at maximum 20% of the documents. So which means we don't need to actually run this process on all the 1 million documents. So our previous solutions, when we were trying to fix up this problem, was to scale up this solution and run it fastly and run it concurrently. And there were a lot of engineering solutions that came over mind. But after realizing this specific point, that we don't need this to be run on all the different documents, I worked with the product manager to see, is there any way that we can stop this process and do this on demand, so this can run only when the reviewer needs the document reviewed. So that was at the time when we were actually originally thinking to solve this problem engineeringly, but through scalability and by faster performance, I was able to put in, give a solution that we don't need to run this process. Rather, we run it only when it is required. So that was the time when we had this complex problem. I gave a very simple solution, which resolved a lot of pain points for our customers and for our engineering team.
And so what happened?
We talk about using the STAR format all the time. Why? Because it's easy to understand. And if you use it, again, regardless of what company you're interviewing at, if you use the STAR format, you will present effectively, right? Because your answers will have a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? The situation task is your beginning. That's the phase of the answer that we're at. Although the candidate kind of veered into action, but didn't do a great job there. But we'll come back to that in a minute. From a setup point of view, I still don't understand what the problem was, right? There was a little bit of kind of discussion about impact, millions of documents and lots of customers. But he used a more substantive word, like I think it was virtually all. But I don't. There's a scoping element here which is missing. Okay, just that's one warning area. But then two, the candidate kind of talks about, well, we did a thing and it made it better, but he didn't really define the thing, right? And so again, I see this now all the time. It's funny how what I notice now, as someone who kind of provides feedback through these videos and whatnot, I pay attention more to the kind of patterns that I see over time, or maybe I'm just getting better as I get older. But what I see again and again and again is kind of living in your own head as a candidate and forgetting that not everyone can do your job. And not everyone has worked at your company. And so the way they discuss, as a candidate, they discuss whatever it is they're working on, doesn't provide enough context for me, the dumb interviewer, who doesn't know maybe anything about your company, your role, your product, your services, your target market, whatever. I lack all of that kind of innate knowledge. And therefore, in order for me to follow along and to really understand what you've done, you as the interview candidate need to take on more of a teaching mentality, and you don't want to get into the weeds and completely dumb it down and try to explain every little thing. But there is an aspect of you need to explain to me better what you're doing, right, and tell me why. So it's a gentle balance of thinking out loud versus kind of getting lost in the weeds. This is why the STAR format helps. This is why preparation helps, because if you sit down with just think situation task. What was the problem you're trying to solve? Who was the customer? What was the issue? Why was this a problem they couldn't solve on their own? How long did you think it was going to take to solve this problem? What resources did you need to pull in to solve this problem? These are all questions you can ask yourself when looking at your setup. Did I sufficiently answer these questions? Right? Would someone who doesn't know me or doesn't know anything about my business understand what I did here? And if the answer is no, you have work to do. If the answer is yes, great. You've done a great job in preparing. But that's a lot of exposition here that it comes up in the feedback sessions that I give. But it's very, very clear here that that's happening, and I wanted to point it out. So if you do like this content, I would really appreciate it if you go ahead and like it, subscribe if you love it.
Previously, when a customer buy our product and import 1 million data, he had to wait for about 2 weeks. Sorry, not 2 weeks, 2 days to actually let this redaction process run on all the documents. Now he doesn't have to wait that time. He can quickly finish off the review setup process and give it up to his reviewers. So this improved the turnaround process for our customers quickly. It reduced about 50% of the setup time for our customers whenever they get a new e-discovery case to work on.
And so if you were to...
This candidate really undersold their result. Whether or not it was a Freudian slip to go from 2 weeks to 2 days, unclear, but even 50% reduction of setup time, 50%, that's a massive number. It's a huge improvement. And the candidate kind of did a disservice to themselves by underselling it. It's not a red flag. It's not a knock against them. It's not something that they wouldn't get the job because of. But this is a situation where the candidate could have done a better job of highlighting the result and painting a clear picture of the outcome, and not just the time savings, but what that meant for the customer, how it impacted them in terms of their budgeting, any number of things that, kind of avenues that you could take in the results phase of the answer. There's opportunities for improvement here where the candidate could have spent just a little bit more time walking through why this was a big deal, what this meant, what the typical amount of time was, and what that meant to a customer in terms of, if you, as an example, if I save 50% time for a customer in setup, what does that actually mean? Is that 7 people working for 2 days instead of 4? That's really expensive. Even if it's one person working for 4 days or 2 days instead of 4, that's good. It's not as great as 7. It's not as great as a team of 50. So without that scoping, it's hard to know how much of an impact this really has, where the candidate could have done a better job of painting that picture and kind of selling what it was they did.
Try and summarize the key insight that led to the simpler solution.
That was a fun little yawn there.
What would you say it was?
Absolutely. So the key input was, I understood that there was this customer pain point. They had to wait 2 days to actually start their real work on the product. I had to do, I did multiple customer research and found that we were doing something very redundant. So the key insight for me would be to actually realize what our customer really wants, and whether we are doing just that, or we have any assumptions about, or are we doing something redundant that is not even needed by them. So I had to constantly look for that customer pain points and then see whether we are solving it in a very effective way. So that was a key insight I gathered from this. Yeah.
And were there alternative solutions that you considered and rejected?
So one of the things I'm doing here is that it's an important note that this was the last question of this interview. So there's always that interview fatigue that sets in if you go for an hour. And obviously, if you're looping for a real job, you're going to be doing this for 4 to 6 hours. So there's the risk of fatigue setting in and the answer quality kind of sliding. And that definitely happened with this candidate. They were fading, I could tell. So I'm asking very leading questions. And these 2 questions I asked, what was the key insight, and what were the alternatives you considered and rejected? These are the sorts of things that in your story prep, as you're getting ready for your interviews, you should be asking yourself as part of your STAR format setup. One of the things I talk about, and I should probably do a longer video as to how to do this and how to do it more effectively, is within each of those buckets, situation, task, action, result. Instead of writing out a long scripted answer that you try to memorize, what is the FAQ of questions that you should answer for that to clearly communicate to someone who doesn't work for you, with you, in your company, in your industry, to understand what it was that the situation task was. what was the action? What was the result? And in the action, that is, I'm asking, what did you consider and reject? Because I want to understand, did they shoot from the hip and just go with the first solution, or did they were they very thoughtful, consider a bunch of different things? What's their process? That was that second question. And the first question is, what was the insight? I have an entirely different video somewhere in YouTube in the playlist. You can find it, but where I talk about the LITE, right? There's star and then there's light. The star light format is, I came up with LITE. It's what was the learning, insight, teaching with an example for this thing you just talked about. And in this case, it was, what is the key insight that you had or someone within your team had that led to the solution? Because this gives you the ability to continue driving the conversation within the interview. You get to the end of your results, you can figure out a way to bridge to, it's a pretty interesting thing how Johnson came up with the solution to solve this problem. Or, I was thinking, it was one of the key things that I learned about this and going through this. There was a really great learning that I took away from this experience that I, having thought about this role that I'm now interviewing for, where I would apply this to my job here. Love to talk about that if you want. If not, we can move on to your next question. And in this case, all I'm sharing with you is that LITE piece to the star, if you keep it in your toolbox, it allows you to drive the conversation and set up a question for which you've already prepared and hopefully already know the answer, and you are well prepared. Therefore, you will present much better, as opposed to hoping that you get a decent question from your interviewer. So it's just another way to control the interview.
Yes. So one of the first solution that I thought of was rather to do it on demand. A customer could actually view a document and then tag it to a tag. And then later, whenever he needed to, what he essentially has to do is the reviewer will have a different user experience. He will just view the document and tag it for redaction, and later he can use that tag to redact all the documents together. So that was the first thing that I thought of. But that would change the way the reviewer has been working for so long. Whenever he reviews the document, he has to have this ability to redact right away. So that was the first solution that came to my mind, and that was the first thing. After thinking out sound about what our reviewers do and what do they need, I rejected that solution first.
So just so I am not misunderstanding, redact in my mind, what that means is, blacklining stuff inside of a document, right?
Yes.
Okay. Right. And so in this alternative world, it was, I tag it for redacting, but then I'd come back to it later to do them all at once?
Yes. So when I tag, the thing is, we were actually making all the document converted to this vector form, so user can redact it on the fly whenever they do it. But since we don't need it, I just tag the document. Whenever I find a content, I just tag the document into a new tag. And then I'll select all the documents that I needed to redact and then tag it to it. And later I enable the process to run on only the tagged documents and come in and then look for it again and then go through the documents again to redact whatever I needed to on the documents. So it was like sort of duplicating the work our reviewers have been doing.
Got it.
So, yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about how this candidate could have improved their answer along the way. I'm gonna now jump into the assessment that would have been right into the room had I been on the hiring for this candidate. Invent and simplify. Timing of the interview hurt ability to dive deeper here. So that's me acknowledging that we were kind of running low on time, and also the candidate was fading, but we were running low on time. The candidate was hampered by poor structure in their answer, which did not effectively communicate what the actual invention was. The question as presented was seeking to understand how the candidate can take customer needs and create simple solutions. The candidate effectively handled the first, but did not sufficiently answer the second part. And more specifically in the content feedback that I gave in the feedback session to the candidate was, I'm still not clear what the solution was. The last question I asked was to get a little bit more probing on that, but again, it didn't really effectively land. I don't know that sitting here right now, having rewatched that video, I could explain to you what this candidate did. And that's part of being an effective candidate when you're going through an interview loop is you have to, again, you're going through, depending on the company that you're interviewing with, there's going to be 4 to 6 interviews, right? Generally, that's how people, sometimes they do panels and group interviews, whatever, but generally you're trying to impress 4 to 6 people. And a lot of that has to do with effectively communicating your content and doing so in a way that when they walk out of the room, they have a sense of, or they end the call, they have a sense of who you are as a candidate. Can you provide value to this company? Can you do the job here? Can you do this job here? Can you work with our team and add lots of value and be an effective and valuable member to the team? And if the interviewer walks out of the room with a lack of clarity around your accomplishments or things that you've done and can't really repeat it back, you've kind of lost, because at that point when they go to write their notes, if they're kind of a good interviewer and they're take their notes and they write their write up and they do all the things that you're supposed to do when you're running an effective process, they're going to have trouble. They're going to struggle to recreate what it was you said. They're not recording these. I have the benefit of having recordings, but they're not going to have a recording. So they're going to struggle to recreate what it was you said. And then they're not going to be able to sell, even in their own mind, you as a candidate. So that's just something for you to keep in mind as to how to improve your answers. So the candidate did undersell their accomplishments a bit, which is something you can do a more effective means of doing, which is just kind of making sure you set context for what the numbers are, what the metrics are, why they matter, how they impact the customer, your business, whatever. But you do have to be clear about what you did. If you want your free mock interview, you can sign up at interview@.com. We also have a slate of other offerings now available. We have access to our content library, which we're adding to on the, I'm going to try and hold myself accountable and say every 2 weeks, but hopefully monthly, where we are chopping up the videos, we're doing the blurring and kind of all of the things to protect people's anonymity, bleeping out names and such, but also adding all of the notes that I took during the interview, as well as the coaching assessment or the assessment that would have been read in the room. That's all there available for you. So if you learn by example and you want access to our massive content library, at this point now it's close to 100 hours, I think, of content. No, 100 videos. Not 100 hours, 100 videos, but each of them range between kind of 8 to 12 minutes. That's a lot of content for you for a pretty affordable, I think, price. We also have our VIP offering. I know the free slots fill up pretty quick, and if you can't get one of those, we do have a VIP offering which jumps the queue and has more availability of time in my calendar because you're a VIP and we want to give you more value. You get to jump the queue, you get immediate access. We also do salary negotiation discussion, as well as if it's an Amazon interview, we'll do a writing assignment assessment where I just read whatever you wrote up. So that's all we got for this week. Be sure to check back with us, and hopefully you're getting value from the content. Thanks.